We're going to use the Immigration Explorer from the New York Times to take a look at German migration to the United States, but also the Canadian provinces. We can discuss that as well. What we have is essentially before the Civil War, already there was German immigration in the United States. And that goes back to, once again, the whole Foundry, Pennsylvania Dutch, and the migration westward via the Old National Road and the settlement throughout all of the Rust Belt. And in Indiana, we know that there's a large German population. If you don't know, now you know. But a lot of you from Indiana are of German ancestry, have a German last name. But also we find throughout the breadbasket, we find a large German population, and that also kind of relates to or explains why we see in this map a mix of all kinds of different denominations of Christianity. One of the things is the groups that were migrating and settling in this area, the reason why they're leaving Germany, the reason why they wanted to get the hell out of there, was because they're tired of persecution. They just kind of wanted to be themselves. They just wanted to practice their own religion, whether it be Mennonite, Methodist, or what have you. And so what they had, essentially this kind of this, they could care less about your different, view of a religion. Just, don't mind me, just let me be me and I'll let you be you. And so one of the things is that it helps explain why there's kind of this diverse array of Germans and also subsequently religions that we find on this map here. It's kind of a scattered pattern here throughout much of the breadbasket, the various types with the Methodist in green. That's what I grew up, which also I'm German. The Lutheran, a lot of German Lutherans, the Mennonite, like my grandmother. So essentially what we have here is a variety of Germans owe their legacy to kind of a push factor back in Germany. But there was also a pull factor, and that pull factor being the availability of land, and so agriculture, farming. Now, sometimes that was a misnomer. Sometimes you get out there, that wasn't really a good life for me out here. So that oftentimes it was kind of a falsehood, the idea that they're going to find free land, it's going to be great, and they're going to clear an area and then live happily ever after. Oftentimes the land wasn't suitable for agriculture. And so what we see also kind of subsequently is kind of this pattern in terms of all along rivers is where we find settlement. In this area here, no really key rivers. Here we have the Des Moines River. Here we have the Iowa River, the Missouri River, the Mississippi River, and subsequently a large German population. For example, Dubuque, Iowa. Very large German population, also a very large Catholic population, so German Catholic. And so what we also see there is across the street from every Catholic church, there's a bar. And so also there's a very rip-roaring Oktoberfest in Dubuque, Iowa. And so here we have the legacy of this German migration. Now, after this kind of this chain migration that occurs, and so you continue to have German migration to this particular area. It does start to slow down over time, but chain migration over time, these little areas become kind of this cluster of Germans, kind of this ethnic cluster or this ethnic village, let's say, of Germans. And so other Germans want to be around other Germans. And so as they migrate, then they settle and kind of cluster. And so these German kind of enclaves become even more German. And we really see that. And so throughout the early United States, from the 1800s to 1900s, the early 20th century, up until that time, at that moment, overwhelmingly most of the migrants to the United States were Germans. About 1 in 5, in fact, were Germans. And they really came in and settled much of the breadbasket, in particular the Corn Belt and the Northern Great Plains. In the Western Great Plains, and the Southern Great Plains, a little different pattern. So first off, let's look at the Russians. And so we can see Russians, we find them over in North Dakota. And so Russians were a little bit more comfortable living in middle of nowhere, cold, desolate, grassland area of North Dakota because it's a lot like home. Whereas the Germans, really not so much. Also, we have these Russians who were here They're kind of German Russians, kind of complicated, but they're these Russians that have been here for a long, long time, in particular in South Dakota and Kansas. And so subsequently, one of the things you find is this German-Russian mix of a particular type of sandwich in Omaha, Nebraska called a Runzeburger. And it owes its legacy to this Russian population that's kind of German, kind of Russian. It's complicated. I'm not going to go into it too far, but this Russian population also came out during the sugar beet harvests and the growth in this particular area of the northern Great Plains, which I mentioned later in terms of agriculture. It's an agricultural crop that grows in this particular area. Well, Russians came to fill a lot of that migration. And the Canadian provinces, very similar pattern. A lot of Germans who migrated to the Canadian provinces, especially with the Canadian Homestead Act a little after the United States Homestead Act. And so also, you have Eastern Europeans, particularly Ukrainians, who also migrated to this particular area of the Canadian prairies in this Great Plains area, so similar to the Russian counterparts. And so Eastern Europeans also found in little the ethnic enclaves here and there in these rural, smaller town areas of the breadbasket that overlaps into Canada.